When I was 16, I got a part-time job at our local library. As an introverted kid who liked reading and loved listening to music, I thought a job at the library was about as good as it could get in terms of work. My 3-hour shifts mostly found me reshelving items that had recently been returned, and I pushed my cart all over the library doing just that. More often than not, the returns brought me to the library's music section, and this being the mid-1980s, vinyl was still the music medium of choice. It was there in the library that I first became aware of the albums produced by Windham Records, a company whose album covers called out to me with their simple, clean design and compelling images of nature. I wound up borrowing many of those albums, and their tranquil, introspective blend of classical, jazz, and folk music resonated with me, not only as a wannabe guitarist and piano player, but as a young person who frequently turned to music to escape the world, or to help make some sense of it. As it turned out, I was just one of millions of people for whom the mellow Windham Hill recordings resonated, and still resonate. Records that gave a surprisingly swift kickstart to the contemplative music genre that ultimately came to be known as New Age. I'm David Peterkovsky, and this is Pop Comforts, a podcast series that explores the unexpected corners of popular culture that bring us comfort. New Age music became really big business in the 90s, thanks to multi-platinum performers like Enya and Yanni. But before their success came a mellow wave of Windham Hill Records artists like guitarists Will Ackerman, Alex DeGrassi, and Michael Hedges, pianists George Winston and Liz Story, and many others. The story of Windham Hill Records began modestly in California's San Francisco Bay Area in the mid-1970s. Will Ackerman, at the time a Palo Alto carpenter/guitarist, launched Windham Hill to market his own self-produced album, which he enigmatically titled The Search for the Turtle's Navel. When I contacted the Grammy-winning musician at his home in Vermont to ask him about the Windham Hill story, Will happily obliged, starting at the very beginning.
I lived on Amherst Street in Palo Alto in what's called College Terrace. My father was a professor of English at the Stanford University. And the next door neighbors were the Kilmartins. And Mr. Kilmartin, or Captain Kilmartin, was in the Navy. And his oldest son, Michael, I remember hearing the sound of a guitar coming from their house to mine. And in those days, you didn't even knock on the door. You just opened the door and went upstairs. And I found Michael, who's got a couple of years on me. There he was playing an electric guitar. And in that little visit, he taught me G and A minor. And they're still my two favorite chords in the world, although I play in open tuning. So I don't know when I'm in that, but I think that combination is great. And that was the beginning. It's like, oh, here, the people pick up guitars and they play them. Now, the craziest story, really, this is absolutely ridiculous. But a million years later, in 1976, now I've just recorded The Search for the Turtle's Navel, and the only place it was being sold is the Plowshare Bookstore on University Avenue in Palo Alto, because it was owned by friends. And I do remember, when I called the record pressing plant, I was told that the minimum order was 300. And I thought, oh, shit, I'm going to have 200 of those in my closet for the rest of my life. It didn't turn out that way. I happened to walk up University Avenue, and then I hadn't seen Michael. I went to school out east here in Massachusetts. And there's Michael coming down University Avenue. He didn't even live there at the point. I think he was living in the East Bay. But it's like, God, hey, you're the guy that put a guitar in my hand for the first time. Come on in and let me give you a copy. And I did. And he called me up shortly thereafter and said, this record is really good. Can I, have another, 15 of these or something? And I said, of course, because again, I thought I would have 200 of those in my closet for the rest of my life. So I might as well give them away. Then he called me up and he said, Will, I want to explain something to you. I work at Fantasy Records. So in this moment, he was arguably the most powerful radio promotion guy in the world. Creedence Clearwater Revival was huge around the world. And here is this guy who is going to radio stations with this. So he has taken a number of my records and he said, okay, every single station that I sent this to is playing it, and 3/4 of them are listing it as heavy airplay. So what's the chance?
The record got particularly good traction in Seattle, and a radio executive there arranged for Will to play his first real concert, a gig that was much bigger than Will realized.
And he said, well, let's do a concert. And can you come up here next Saturday? And I said, sure. And my cousin, Alex DeGrassi, whose name you probably know.
Yes.
My cousin, he's building with me, and he comes along. We get to the station, and everybody's freaked out. It's like, you're late. And I'm like, for what am I late for? I thought I was going to do a little thing on the air or whatever. And he said, well, just follow me. And so I'm driving behind his car, and we come to a big parking lot, and he said, take the guitar, run here. And he literally pushes me out on stage. And there I am standing on the stage of the Seattle Opera House. And there are 2,300 people. It's sold out. This is the first concert I've ever been paid for in my life.
Unbelievable.
So, right, that's from 0 to 5,000 miles an hour. And I played a little bit, around the Bay Area, and I'd learned, because I have all these different tunings. Every song is a different tuning except for Ann's Song and Hawk Circle. And so I'm having to change, hear the tuning again and all this bullshit. Now, of course, when I tour, I have somebody that does all that for me. So I've learned to be kind of funny because I've got all this bullshit I've got to do in the meantime. And I finally just run out of pieces. I don't know anything more. I remember I went into standard tuning and I started doing Mrs. Brown, You Got a Lovely Daughter, and brought the house down. I just, they were just laughing, roaring, and I'm singing. And I said, look, honest to God, this is all I know. All I could do is do it again. And they're going, yeah, do that, do the whole thing. And I'm looking at, across the stage, and there's Alex DeGrassi, my cousin. And I said, listen, my cousin's over here and he plays better than I do, and I'm done. So his name is Alex DeGrassi. And everybody's going, 3,200 people who have no idea who Alex is, just yelling, Alex, Alex. And DeGrassi comes on stage and, of course, just kills him. Now, how ludicrous how could that happen? But that's what happened. I just went from city to city that was playing my record. K-Twin in Minneapolis, and Kink in Portland, Kazam, Seattle, KCFR in the Bay Area, along with KFAT and Gilroy, blah, blah, blah. And, it was on the East Coast, West Coast, some stuff in Chicago, Minneapolis. So there you are. A guy who does this little record, and, your first concert is sold out at an opera house. And, it's just crazy.
0 to 5,000 might be an understatement, I'm realizing.
Yeah. It's still a mystery to me. But there you are.
And do I have it right? As this is all happening, you are literally working as a carpenter?
Yeah. My first company was Windham Hill Builders, a general contracting company. I had the good fortune of meeting a man named Asmund Hansen, who was a Norwegian boat builder turned ship's carpenter for the Norwegian Merchant Marine, and then a house builder. And of course, if you're a boat builder, building square things is child's play. But I met Ozzy through a woman I was dating. There's a song called What the Buzzard Told Suzanne, and that was Suzanne. But he put me to work, but I had an opportunity to learn from the best guy in the world. Every structure here I think we have 9 structures on the property. I built all of them myself. I was very fortunate. I ended up building his and hers houses for David and Lucille Packard of Hewlett Packard, and Nancy Packard, their daughter, it's a long story, but it's intertwined with marine biology, because I ended up actually hunting for specimens for John DuPont's Marine Museum, as in the DuPonts. And he would say, okay, we need to find Strongylos and Trotus purpuratus. Oh, that one I know. Okay, I can just go out to Monterey and get that. But then I remember there was another one, Hymenophiastus cyanocrypta. I had to go to Samoa to get that one. So that was a big part of my life that I was, diving. I became a scuba instructor as well. It was an interesting life with a lot of things going on, building very high-end stuff and working for Ozzy. and having the opportunity to have a boat builder teach me about building. And I absolutely adored it.
While learning building from a master builder, Will was also building up his music venture, working alongside his business partner and first wife, Ann Robinson, and taking advantage of serendipity along the way.
One of the craziest fucking things where these things merge is that Tom Jack and Steve Cohen, friends in Palo Alto who were general contractors, they got a call from somebody up in El Cerrito, California, who wanted somebody to do some building there, and they didn't want to make the trek. And so, if you want the gig, go do it. So I go and meet Chris Strachwitz, who owns Arhoolie Records, which is mostly a blues label, but a very, very good independent label. And one of the things I'm building is a retail store. And then behind that is an independent distributor, Rhythm Research Record Distributing. And so you've got this gig building, but suddenly you are in an environment where everything you could possibly want to know about independent records is happening right next to you. And so my first distributor actually was Chris Strachwitz at Arhoolie Records, and then Ed Denson, who had founded Tacoma with John Fahey, was just starting the label. So again, I'm called to be a builder, and I'm in the middle of, here, this is how this works. And, do you want to distribute my record? And they said, you have a record? I said, yeah, here. And they said, yeah, we'd be happy to distribute your record. So doors opened almost impossibly. I mean, I look at it and it's like, I can't even believe the stories. I mean, I couldn't make up anything as good as what actually happened. Crazy, right? You'll go to El Cerrito and be a carpenter. No, I'm going to be in the middle of the independent record business. And by the way, here's my record.
Yeah. I have a geography question for you. You're a California guy and you named your company after a place in Vermont. How did that happen?
After my mother's suicide, my father remarried. And I think it'd be fair to say that the woman he married wasn't particularly interested in raising a kid. And it was true also that they were going to live in England for about a year. So I was shipped off to school about 40 minutes from here at Northfield Mount Hermon School. I was dating a girl named Kate, and we'd been kissing behind some building or other. And she said, I think I know where we could get a room for the weekend. Now, you're in high school, and you've got a girl saying that we can probably get a room. And I'm like, this is good. This is really good. I mean, I'd never slept with a girl in my life. And so we got fake passes, and the schools had buses that would take people, and it happened to be Brattleboro, one of them, I can't remember, I think Putney and a number of other places. But so we took this thing and we lied and said that we had passes and the parents and all the rest of this stuff, and arrived at Windham Hill Farm. Again, it was also an inn. And we walked in and Hugh, the owner of the thing, Hugh and Mary owned it. And Hugh said, "Oh, Kate, are you with your parents?" And she said, "No, we just came up. And here's my boyfriend, Will." And he said, "Okay, well, great. You can have the North Room." So here we are, a couple of high school kids who have now just been given a room for the weekend. This is good. This is very good. And long story short, this ended up being home, Windham Hill. I really had been, I think it'd be safe to say, abandoned. And so that became home for me. And Hugh and Mary had 3 adopted kids, and in some respects, I became the 4th. And that's an exaggeration. I mean, I did have some part of a family in California, but anyway, to me, it was a place my heart lived, and that I could be appreciated as a person and as a player as well. So that's why the name Windham Hill was Windham Hill Builders. All of Windham Hill stuff was because of that place, which is, again, only about a half an hour, 35 minutes just up the road from here.
Even now, nearly a half-century after Will was getting started with Windham Hill, he can rattle off almost all of the label's first dozen releases by release number.
C-1001 was my Turtles Navel. C-1002 was a singer-songwriter, Linda Waterfall, that I knew. And she lived in Seattle, and Kazam Radio could play that very well. My It Takes a Year was number 3. Number 4 was actually a blues band, Kid Africa, which we got no traction with. 5 was Robbie Basho. 6 was my third record. 7, I don't remember. 8, Eric Satie piano solos with Bill Quist, but I'm actually doing a new version of that soon. 9, Degrassi. 10, Robbie Basho. 11, David Qualley, a guitarist from Germany. 12, George Winston. And then, of course, the roof went off.
So you mentioned distribution earlier, and I wanted to ask you about this. I used to encounter Windham Hill records and tapes and CDs in bookstores all the time. But I understand that's actually where you sold the bulk of Windham Hill's records, at least initially. Is that accurate?
Well, the only place in the world that was selling it for quite some time was the Plowshare Bookstore in Palo Alto. And I would say that once Michael Kilmartin got involved and he started, getting us radio airplay, then of course, but in those days I wasn't looking to sign a deal with a record label. But I certainly wanted the airplay. But Michael, again, this guy that had been my next door neighbor, knew every independent FM radio station in the country. That's what he did for a living. And he never charged me anything at all. It was just something, the older kid who lived next door to me that I always admired was just promoting me. There you are.
Yeah. So when you started the label, was anyone else doing what you were doing in terms of marketing introspective instrumental acoustic music in the way that Windham Hill did?
Well, the only thing I had that I could look to as sort of a guiding light was the Tacoma Records label that John Fahey created, because he had signed Robbie Basho, who actually I worked with later. And because of Michael Kilmartin, that we're getting this huge radio airplay out of major commercial stations in Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis, Cambridge, Chicago, all over California, Denver, Boulder. It just goes on. We became instantaneously, if not famous, at least certainly being heard by a hell of a lot of people. And, once you start doing if you have a radio station that's really, they always want to be, part of sponsoring you in a concert. And so suddenly, I'm playing and the other people is coming along, my cousin Degrassi, we're playing pretty much every damn city that's north of the Mason-Dixon line, although that also would have included Austin, Texas. But major markets being promoted for free by major FM radio stations.
I want to switch gears and ask you a songwriting question. Do you recall where you got your inspiration for the music you wrote early on? And would you say that your sources of inspiration have been fairly consistent throughout your career?
Well, the thing that inspired me, everybody says, well, what guitar player? Well, Basho, to some degree. Kottke was, too rhythmic. But what mattered to me was Eric Satie. The simplicity of Satie. The first Ciccolini recording that was on Angel Records. A girl named Sarah Klepsch, who, by the way, has now moved from California and lives just down in Northampton. But it was she who brought me the Aldo Ciccolini recordings of Eric Satie. And to this day, however much wonderful music I've heard in life, there's still nothing that was more important to me. The permission to be simple. Satie, I've learned to play the Je me petit and the Nocien and Sarabande to some degree on piano. But that was, to me, music doesn't need percussion. It can be incredibly intimate. It doesn't have to be something you can dance to. And some of the Sibelius's third, I'm trying to think, I get the Fifth Symphony from Sibelius. But anyway, it was all about Satie.
Mm-hmm. And I never made the connection. I'm actually a big Satie fan as well, but I can see it.
Really, but hearing the Je me petit, the Nocien, the Sarabande, it was just like, oh, okay, all right. You don't have to move fast. You just need to connect, as that music did for me.
Mm-hmm. And is nature an inspiration for you? I feel like the photography on the Windham Hill records is sort of inextricably linked with the natural world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I ever intellectualized that, but at Stanford University, one of my father's colleagues, a guy named Willard Wyman, I know that mountain climbing and the natural world was very important to Bill Wyman. And my father didn't know what the fuck to do with me. And so in the summer after my mother's death, he hooked me up with Bill Wyman. And what we were doing was basically we were building or repairing hiking trails in the Yosemite National Park. And to have been removed from Palo Alto and the constant awareness of, what had happened, my mother's suicide, I ended up spending the better part of an entire summer. After a while, I became, actually almost part of the show. I mean, because there were multiple groups of people that went up there. And, it sort of exploited, young people's work for the National Forest System, but it was also absolutely beautiful. We would go, for 2 months without, we'd see some people hiking and the rest of it. We were way the fuck back in there and, just working hard. And that's when I learned that I love physical work, and I still do. The sadness you hear in my music is real. That's not who I am now. That isn't to say that I don't connect. I've had so much therapy. I've connected to a lot of horrific stuff. But some people are more resilient than others, I guess. And I would say that the connection to nature via those months for more than 1 year in this year's finding solace and strength and beauty in nature is what I think saved my ass.
Yeah. I want to segue a little bit. I want to ask you about the term New Age, which of course can conjure up a wide range of things for music fans. I'm wondering, how do you relate to that term these days and back in the...
Yeah, well, for so long, Windham Hill almost was a standalone thing. People called, and I even listened to other players, and it's kind of Windham Hill-like, kind of deal. I don't think I particularly loved being subsumed into a genre that previously had been almost, not single-handedly, God knows, but almost single-handedly created and made commercial by Windham Hill Records. I guess, they always need to come up with some codification, and ultimately that, helped create a Grammy and playlists that included the word New Age. So I didn't love the idea of being subsumed into that. On the other hand, I think it ultimately probably was very good for us, and certainly it was good for the genre in general. Does that answer the question?
I think so. And it's interesting, as I was preparing for this, I saw that George Winston said he preferred the term rural folk, and I'm wondering if you ever tried to push alternatives to New Age.
Well, the name Windham Hill became so synonymous with, obviously, us, but people would call what became New Age sort of, like Windham Hill kind of thing. But, ultimately, we were subsumed into this New Age thing. I the whole notion that it's a bunch of people sitting around, praying and chants and all the rest of it. That's, there's a whole lot of stuff in there that wasn't me or wasn't us. And so I couldn't ever completely embrace it. But at the same time, ultimately that radio format became incredibly important to us. And finally I just shut up and said, okay, New Age. All right. But for so long, it was just Windham Hill Records. That seemed to be damn near a genre in itself.
Yeah. And how would you describe the Windham Hill sound or aesthetic, if you would even agree there was one?
Well, as a kid, the Kingston Trio, listened to radio, blah, blah, blah. But again, when I heard Eric Satie, that changed everything. This, the permission to be incredibly simple, or what appears simple. I had to be moved, really emotionally moved. And I didn't, tons of people can play the guitar a million times better than I can, and has always been the case. My cousin Alex DeGrassi was right there and writing beautiful music. Of course, seeing Michael Hedges was also transformative. But, because of Satie, I always knew that piano mattered to me. And so, and George Winston, who was, closer to New Age than, say, Liz Story originally, fairly simple, fairly repetitive, but very emotionally involving. And, so I think really that was the criteria. Did the stuff move me or not? And I really couldn't care less for people who are simply doing gymnastics on an instrument. I mean, I could care less. If it doesn't have the power of connecting very deeply emotionally, then it didn't matter to me. And I don't know if that's answering your question or not. To get on the Windham Hill label, all you had to do was have some talent and some originality, but have music that is really going to touch people's hearts.
That seems to be the through line, this emotional chord that comes through.
I think so. I mean, that's, obviously I admire innovators like Hedges. And it's not like I wanted this to be, just the most simplistic thing in the world, but it just plain had to move me. And there were a billion players who, of course, were knocking on our door, but it didn't connect with my heart. So to hell with it.
Will eventually said the hell with it in a bigger way, when in 1992, he sold his share of Windham Hill to the music behemoth BMG, which was later acquired by Sony. So I want to move forward and ask you, what compelled you to sell your share of the label?
We'd become a corporation. I'm sort of guessing it might have been, 70 people in offices in Los Angeles and the A&M lot and, Denver and Boston. But we became a corporation. And, at first it's very validating. I mean, look, we're doing all this. And as soon as we had radio stations in every major city, pretty much, that, brought about concerts. But we just walked in at a level that nobody could have imagined. I mean, normally you'd be just kind of clawing your way up into where, you could actually get on a stage for 300 people. But, that we're turning up in town for the first time and playing Carnegie Hall, crazy and Red Rocks and the Hollywood Bowl and just crazy shit. And it was happening so fast that it was almost, made you dizzy. It's just, who was it? They said, how did I get here? And I would say that, how the hell did we get here?
And when people equate Windham Hill's catalog with comfort or so-called, well, not easy listening because that's a whole other genre, but do you feel that linking it with comfort or calm is a fair assessment? I know it's kind of painting with a broad brush, but it seems like that happened.
No, I didn't want to be subsumed by the term New Age. I think there's a lot of sort of crap that goes with that, and I didn't like it much. But look, as long as our music was actually moving people, if that helps them go to sleep, that's okay. If it helps them escape from a world of pressure in their work or at home or they're looking for some solace, of course, that's an honor. And I can't control, nor should I control how we get there. But that was not the point, but it was nice that it actually mattered to people and that they connected emotionally to the music and they found some solace in it. Again, not intended on my part, but neither is it a surprise that other people would find, because that's how I felt about it.
And before we run out of time, it's not every day I get to personally compliment and or thank a musician for something they've done, but the album you put out in 2021 with Jeff Oster and Tom Eaton, Brothers, is a favorite of mine.
Oh, good.
Peak pandemic listening for me.
Well, look, those are, I consider Jeff Oster to be my closest friend really in the world. And Tom, of course, after all the years of working together, the two of us. As a matter of fact, for the first time in my life, and I'm working on a new album now, for the first time in my life, I'm turning over the production credit to Tom. For once, I can get to be a musician and not a musician and a producer. For the first time in my life, I can just say, I trust this guy. tell me when I've got it. And I'm actually getting chills. But that for me, after all these years and being so self-contained, to be able to say, was that any good, Tom? No. Okay, we'll do it again. Oh, that one you liked? Okay, good, fine. We're done. It's been a revelation to see what it is to feel what I do for other people, to have Tom, and I can concentrate on the heart of the music, the fingers to some degree, but really connect with the heart.
So maybe this is as close as you'll get to retirement, just not producing yourself.
Well, yeah, as long as Tom can put up with me, and it seems like we get along pretty good. But it's kind of cool, really, to get to experience what it is that I do for other people. Oh, that's what it feels like. But I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Sounds like it, yeah. Well, Will, I want to thank you so much for sharing the story of Windham Hill and its unique corner of pop culture history, I suppose I could say. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. This has been great.
Well, thanks, for wanting to hear it. It's a story that I never tire of thinking about or speaking about. I'm very proud of so many of the things we did. And we had a hell of a lot of fun, too. I think really the most important thing was that Windham Hill was not started to make money. It was to record my music as I wanted it, and then being a musician as well as a producer so that I know what they're feeling and allow them the freedom to show me what they can do. And they, as Tom has done for me, can just concentrate on play your music and connect your heart to that music. But for the first time in my life, to actually experience what it is I've been doing for all these decades. It was great fun and revelatory, and brought our friendship, which is already very tight, even closer.
I'm excited to hear what comes out of all of it.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Will.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, Windham Hill Records' mellow output led to what one greatest hits style compilation referred to as a quiet revolution in music. And along with it came millions of fans. But perhaps no one is as serious about preserving and celebrating Windham Hill's calm legacy as this fan.
I'm John Dark. I manage the WindhamHillRecords.com fan site, as well as the Windhaming page on Facebook and the Windham Hill Lovers group on Facebook, as well as some other properties. And by day, I'm a technology marketer.
Yep. In addition to having a sizable collection of Windham Hill vinyl in his Northern California home, John's also the label's unofficial keeper of the flame, at least through his Windham Hill discography website and his online groups. Like me, he became a Windham Hill fan early in life, but it was a class he took in college that sealed the deal.
So I started listening to Windham Hill as a young teen. I had walked into my local record shop, which turned out was owned by the guy who now owns Valley Entertainment, who was a Windham Hill distributor. And they had a copy of George Winston's Autumn playing. And I had heard Keith Jarrett's Cologne concert not long before that. And so it struck a chord and I picked it up and then liked it so much that the next week I went back with my allowance and tried to pick up another copy. And that was Will Ackerman's Passage. And, over time I would pick up another one here and there. And then I went to UC Santa Cruz and did take a clapping for credits course and had a representative from Windham Hill come in just because the professor wanted somebody who was working in the industry to talk a little bit about the label. Now, that is where the name Windhaming comes from, which is what I originally called the fan site. And that's because the PR rep told me that in Japan, young people would go off picnicking, bringing cassette music of Windham Hill Records, and they called it Windhaming. And I just thought it was such a glorious story that made perfect sense and was also probably public relations hoo-ha, but I loved it. And so it stuck with me. And as I continued to play Windham Hill over the years, that it was just something that I thought about a lot. So when I started the site, that's how we chose the name.
It's a great name, and maybe even a greater name is Clapping for Credits. Is that what you said the college class was?
Clapping for Credits. I think the class was actually called Popular American Music. I learned a lot about Billy Joel and the Grateful Dead. These were just fans of the professor, but we always called it Clapping for Credits.
Everyone's got to take one of those kind of courses in college.
Well, you always need 2 credits just to fill out something, and this is what did it. And it was a fun class. I actually enjoyed it.
Uh-huh. Now, to fast forward a bit, can you talk about what compelled you to put together an archive of Windham Hill records, which I think predates the website, if I have it right?
Well, so the website started off really just with the discography, and it was a confluence of a couple of things. I had been looking for Windham Hill information. There was one person who hosted reviews of Windham Hill online, a guy named Colin Glassy, who's an active member of the Windham group still. But there wasn't much else beyond that. Sony Legacy was not doing much for the label, and I was looking for liner notes and couldn't find my copy of whatever record it was, and thought it was a real shame that it wasn't online. And then I saw the movie Julia and Julia, about the woman named Julia who published a blog post every day with the recipe from Julia Child Cookbook. And I thought, well, gosh, I need to learn WordPress just as something that was entertaining to me. And I certainly want to see these records get their due. So I started just posting liner notes from each of the records, and so that people could find information about the label and then interesting articles. Over time, interestingly, my my site, like many blogs, I set it aside a little bit as we've had more and more conversation in the Facebook group, for better or worse, right? You're able to connect with so many fans and so many artists on Facebook. It's fantastic. But it does also mean that, individual blogs get set a little bit by the wayside.
Uh-huh. But you do find your tribe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
bigger picture question for you. How do you view Windham Hill's overall musical or popular culture legacy? I'm wondering how you would answer that.
It's a tricky question in a way because we've seen such fracturing and siloing of music in some ways, and yet a lot of cross-pollination in other ways of music, with the advent of streaming music being available to everyone everywhere and people stumbling across, there's still folks stumbling across George Winston's music who are finding it very relevant. So on the one hand, I think, New Age and the Windham Hill flavor of New Age, which is really quite distinct from a lot of other New Age, spawned a lot of love of what is now called neoclassical, artists who are playing instrumental music, which is not strictly classical, but has influences of classical and jazz and, maybe bluegrass, but a little bit more formal. I think if you listen to what's happening in the subgenre vaporwave, there's a tremendous amount of ambient synth music, which would have been called New Age 30, 40 years ago, but is now being pitched as some sort of future dystopian art project more than anything else. But I think a lot of those artists wouldn't have existed had they not heard Windham Hill playing, at the malls, at the airports, at the places where they were walking around as kids. And there's still a very direct influence in that Will's production at Imaginary Road Studios, together with Tom Eaton, has spurred an entirely new generation of artists. And individually, those artists who were once upon a time on Windham Hill Records have continued to produce new music. And if you're a kind of guy like me who never gives up on an artist, you continue to listen to the incredible new music coming from, Barbara Higbee, or over the years, Philip Auberg, or, name your, I'm sure I'm going to insult somebody by not naming them, but some of just the incredible music that's been coming out over the years from those same artists who were once upon a time on Windham Hill. So the influence is multifold and expresses itself in a lot of different ways. And I have a feeling a lot of the younger kids who have been influenced by Windham Hill don't even know it because they didn't know what it was, because it was just what they heard when they walked into the Monterey Bay Aquarium, or played their first How to Use Your Macintosh cassette tape, which featured Windham Hill in the background. So there's influence everywhere.
How about that? I'm curious, have you ever heard the Windham Hill joke on the old comedy TV show Mystery Science Theater 3000?
I don't think I have.
Well, I could teach you how to play the keyboards.
Will it take long?
No, of course not. Come on over here. Here, check this out. Okay, put your hand over here.
Okay.
Put your finger down. See?
Like that?
Yeah.
Oh.
See? Yeah,
cool.
you're playing a New Age chord now, okay?
Hey.
Just like Yanni. All right, now, put another finger down. There.
Okay.
See? Now you're playing a Yanni lick. Now hold it down for an hour.
Yeah?
Now hold it down till you get a record contract from Windham Hill.
Oh, hey, cool.
There was also a metal band I want to say they were started in the early 2000s called Windham Hell. And they were sort of an orchestral metal band. So they had the cello, but it was really metal. And I just always thought that was the best name for a neoclassical metal band that you could come up with.
Well, John, I know that Will Ackerman is flattered by all the attention you've given to Windham Hill, and I'm suitably impressed as well. This has been great.
Thank you very much. Take care, David.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, even though the last new Windham Hill release was back in 2007, the thoughtfully plucked guitar strings and contemplative piano melodies emanating from William Ackerman's gentle venture into the record business live on. And their echoes can still be heard in new music that may not bear the Windham Hill label, but clearly bears its influence. Pop Comforts is a production of me, David Peterkovsky. My thanks to William Ackerman for the stroll down Windham Hill Records' memory lane, and to John Dark from WindhamHillRecords.com. Music for this episode was provided by Chris Zabriskie, Ernie Francistein, and Lou Cunningham, an independent artist who cites Will Ackerman and Windham Hill as major influences. A link to Lou's music is in the show notes. You can find the Pop Comforts webpage on Medium.com, specifically at popcomfortspodcast.medium.com. And be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. On the next episode of Pop Comforts, we'll explore music appreciation of a different kind. In Japan, there are hundreds of cozy cafes and bars where the lights are dim and socializing often takes a back seat to deep listening to jazz music. And the tradition is gaining ground beyond Japan, including one chill spot in my hometown. That's next time on Pop Comforts. Until then, thanks for listening.